Thank you for joining me on the Way Up podcast with Geoff Knoll. I'm your host, Geoff Knoll. Today, in this episode, I was able to gain some great insight into James Watson, aka JMFW Worldwide. James grew up in a small town called Miller, Missouri. After high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he was promoted to the rank of Sergeant First Class. He started a lawn maintenance business that took off and became successful. In 2001, he started selling real estate. Shortly after, bought into the Realty Executives franchise. In 2009, he started his pro bass fishing career. Stick with us in this podcast. You are not going to want to miss it. Hey, I am happy to be here with James Watson. He is got a whole lot of stuff going on. Very excited to have him on the podcast. And so, James, I just want you to tell us about yourself. Where are you from? What has your career looked like? And what hobbies do you have?
All right. Well, my name's James Worldwide Watson. That is my brand. I'm a full-time professional bass fisherman on Major League Fishing's Bass Pro Tour. You'll see it on the Discovery Channel, the Outdoor Channel. And I've not always been a full-time touring pro. Actually, I got started right out of high school. I've always fished, don't get me wrong. But out of high school, jumped around from job to job, really didn't have a purpose or direction in life. That all I knew is I wanted to fish, and I just ended up joining the Army to get away from everything. And so I did about 9 years active duty in the United States Army. Went to places like Fort Knox, Kentucky, Fort Drum, the 10th Mountain Division, and ended up at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And that's how this all really started to go. And I started a lawn business, a landscaping business, or lawn maintenance business, more or less. My brother Joe, who's an agent there in the office with you, he owns that business still to this day. And it's just crazy how my life has happened, how it evolved, and the people that I come in contact with that I didn't really know were opportunities when I grew up in a small town of Miller, Missouri, and there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities out there unless you were a farmer or in agriculture or something like that, or running cattle. And we lived on a very, very small 10-acre little place growing up, hunting and fishing all my life. But it's just funny that so many opportunities come up in my life that I didn't even know were opportunities, Geoff, that got me to where I'm at today. And take a hobby and turn it into a living is, you can only do that here in America.
Well, tell me a little bit about your real estate career. Once you got out of the Army, how you transitioned into that and what you built that up to, and the property management, and how you've really leveraged that to position yourself where essentially that's passive income now. How did you get from working your ass off to passive income and able to be a professional fisherman and travel and still be making money?
Well, like I just mentioned, the people that I come in contact with throughout my life, it's just crazy how it happened. And it really, my work ethic, I'm not as ambitious as I used to be because I'm 50 years old now. But as a young man, I always had a work ethic about me. Besides being, a full-time soldier, I always found a way to make an extra dollar hustling, whether it was dumpster diving for aluminum cans and bottles in Fort Drum out of the barracks, or when I got here to Fort Leonard Wood, I was working in the 285th Engineer Detachment, was part of the 5th Engineers, and just got to Fort Leonard Wood. And of course, I've always fished, and I went and I fished a tournament on Grand Lake of the Cherokees. I come in second place. It was a pretty good sized tournament. It was in the Post paper, Athlete of the Week. and a first sergeant by the name of Ray Pruitt noticed me in the newspaper, and he more or less come down to the 285th Engineers and recruited me and took me up to Bravo Company 5th Engineers and took me under his wing and said, "You're going to work for me," because of that passion for the outdoors and fishing and hunting. And so I did. And what First Sergeant Pruitt had at that time, he had a very successful side hustle called Pruitt's Tree Service. And I drug brush for him on the weekends. And every day I worked for him, it was $100 bill in my pocket. And one day, shortly after that, I had met him. I'd bought a riding lawnmower to mow my yard. I'd closed on a house, my first home there in St. Robert. I bought a riding lawnmower off a soldier that was ETSing, and First Sergeant hollers at me and says, "Hey, I got to go TDY. I don't want Carol to mow the yard. Come, Watson, would you come over and take care of my yard?" And I said, "Sure thing, First Sergeant." He hands me $40. And I go, "You don't have to pay me, First Sergeant." I said, "Besides that, $40, that's a little large for, 1 yard." And he said, No. He said, "I got mine, and you got the lieutenants down the street too. You're going to mow a couple of them here." I said, "Okay." And Jeff, before you knew it, I had like 80 yards on post. I mean, crushing it, making money, then all of a sudden, we're doing great things in the 5th Engineers. I'm in Assault and Obstacle Platoon running the heavy equipment and taking care of business and getting promoted. I made Staff Sergeant. First Sergeant Pruitt, Command Sergeant Major Wilder made sure that as soon as I got promoted, my name went in the hat for drill sergeant duty. Boom, next thing you know, I'm putting the hat on. My career is just cooking right along. And my lawn business is just freaking taking off like crazy. I've got I got multiple drill sergeants helping me mow yards. Hell, at one point, one of my drill sergeant, when I went through basic training, even was mowing some yards for me throughout the time. He had retired, and he also was part of the 5th Engineers. And anyway, we had become good friends, and it just kept going crazy. And I mowed a lot of yards for Remax. And Shirley Spencer, the owner of Remax there in St. Robert, says to me one day, I got my drill sergeant hat on, I got my snowplow going, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it." And I'm juggling soldier duties and running a business. And she said, "Man, you're dependable." And I said, "That's what you pay me for." And she goes, "You would be really good at selling houses. If you ever decide to get your real estate license, I got a place for you." And lo and behold, about a year later, I'm at a crossroads. I'm making really good money in my lawn maintenance business. My wife at the time had moved from being an English teacher at the Waynesville School District to now a guidance counselor. Had finished her master's degree, making really good money. And we made a decision that we were going to ETS. And I ETS, got my real estate license, went to work for Shirley at Remax there down the street. And it's funny, it's actually in our current office, Jeff, where you're at right now is where my real estate career took off. Shirley was she said, I said, "What I do now, I got my license." And she said, "Hey, let your lawn customers know and everybody that you're selling real estate." I said, "Oh, that's too easy." I kid you not, I typed up a letter. I put Nice Yard Lawn Service on one side of it, up at the top, and at the other top side, I put Remax. I sent it out to all my I had about 180 customers at that time. And in the first week of me having my license, I got 6 listings. And I'll never forget it. 104 Dogwood Circle. I forgot Reggie, Sergeant Major Reggie. I forgot his last name. He was my first listing and my first sale, all in about the first 48 days I was an agent. And Shirley hands me my first check, and she goes, "I have a feeling I'll be giving you a lot of these." And I said, "Hell yeah, you are." And that was the start of my real estate career. And I smoked it. That was early in 2002. And she gave me that Ray Pruitt give me that opportunity. Shirley Spencer give me that opportunity. And I ran with it. And a few years of doing business at Remax, I learned a lot about selling real estate, had that great opportunity. But my aggressiveness in that office wasn't suitable for the agents that worked in that office. They didn't like my aggressive way of doing things. I knew when a soldier walked into that office and they were talking about renting, I could tell who I could and couldn't sell a house to. And I would watch able and willing people or listen inside the office, and I'd watch these people walk outside, and I'm like, those people want to buy a house. And sure enough, numerous times I'd see that person had another real estate office shortly after they left our office, if not immediately, pull into Century 21 or somewhere else. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I was super aggressive, and the older women that worked at real estate, nothing against them, God bless them, they didn't like my aggressiveness. And they felt like if that person talked to them and they didn't want to buy a house with them, that person should be off limits. And I didn't. So I crushed it there. And the last paycheck that Shirley Spencer ever gave me was on a giant deal that I worked hard on with another service member and his dad, Max and Bryce Bowman. And they bought the old building next to Orslins and a bunch of apartments that Jerry Laughlin built for him. And she slid me a $92,000 check and said, "You got to go." And that was the end of my days at Remax.
Well,
and that's how Realty Executives spun off.
I'm not sure about it, but I'm pretty sure that if I sold a big enough deal that I'm getting a $92,000 check, I don't think you're going to ask me to leave. I could be wrong, maybe, but
well, the thing is, Jeff, I paid it was $1,500 to $1,800 a month is what I paid to get 95% of my commission. Now, that was a risk for a lot of agents. The only other agent that did that was Fred Brady. So I knew my capabilities. I knew what I had, in my pocket, that I was going to sell a lot of real estate the way things are going. So I took her up on her desk fees. And a note to anybody that's into the real estate business or in the brokerage business like I am, don't offer people something that you ain't willing to swallow. And I believe that the agents, and this is nothing against Shirley or the agents, but I believe that the overall factor was if somebody else would have done, I think I did 6 deals that year where the commission was over $35,000. And the icing on the cake was that big giant one. So Shirley wasn't making, but 5% off of me. So I think that had a lot to do with it. A lot to do with office dynamics of me being boisterous. One, I cussed too much. All right. So Shirley would set a bar of soap on my desk and stay there all the time. And it was just all about the office dynamics. And Shirley had to do what she felt was best for her office. And that was to ask me to leave. And I didn't want to. I wanted to stay under that umbrella. But I did. And again, the opportunity come up. I hollered down the the hallway at Fred. I'm like, Fred, who had his broker's license. I said, you want to open up an office? He said, yep. He walks right out and he's got all this stuff ready to go in a box. He walks out and he shops around and I owned everything. Fred was my broker. And I bought a Realty Executives franchise. That's how Realty Executives come about. My my wife Sarah at the time, she quit her job. She went and got her broker's license, and we just tore it up in the real estate business. That was in 2005. I was the number one agent with units sold in Realty Executives franchise. Closed over 100 and 190, 175 or 100, 190 sides. Again, with the help of my wife at the time and Fred, it was just phenomenal. It was booming. 2005 was freaking gangbusters, and it's crazy. In late 2005 or early 2006, a couple of guys had come in my office, and I could tell they were sniffing around. I knew they'd been at other offices by the way they had talked, but they'd sit down with me at my office, right there where you're at, right there where Bree's office is now. They sit down and said, hey, we're thinking about coming to Fort Leonard Wood. Looks like it's going to take off real big. We're wanting to build some houses. And I said, all right. I said, here's what we got. Here's what we need, blah, blah, blah. Meeting went good and said, okay, we're going to send this to our boss. A few days later, a guy by the name of Don Hauser comes with Jeff Dottie, and they sit down at my desk. I talk to him again, and Don Hauser looks at me. He says, okay, great. He says, these are the size of houses that do the best. This is your BAH, your housing allowance. And then he looks at me and he says, I got one important question. And I said, what's that, Mr. Hauser? And he says, if I build these, how many of these can you sell in a year? And I looked at him and I said, fucking all of them. And that's how Don Hauser and Timber Ridge Builders got started at St. Robert.
That is awesome. That is
we've
awesome.
Built 600 since then.
Holy crap. I know that we still represent their listings. So
yes, we do.
That is phenomenal. So what you just told me, what I heard from all of that is proximity is power. The people that you are around definitely will shape who you become, and that you have to gamble on yourself. You have to invest in yourself. So even though you weren't wanting to get out of RE/MAX, being pushed into a situation that may have been uncomfortable was actually a growing opportunity for you to really dominate that market.
I feel like things happen in a weird way, but you generally don't do those things in your life without a lot of good people around you.
Yeah, for sure.
You look at some of the offices in town that have been through my brokerage, and the opportunities that my office provided them launched their careers.
That is awesome. So let me ask you another question. What would you say is one of your biggest failures? How did you overcome it? And what did you learn from that? In hindsight, would you say that it made your life better? And I know that was a lot.
All right. Nope. Biggest failure in my life was my marriage. And I've never fully recovered from it, and probably never will. It changed me as a human being, as a man, for the rest of my life. And I've never remarried since. I've only been engaged one other time, but that was the biggest failure in my life. Got married super young at the age of 20. Sarah was 18. We grew up as young adults. We went through a lot of trials and tribulations as young adults to get where we're at. That you won't ever go through again in your life unless you just hit rock bottom and go bankrupt and become homeless. I mean, so I failed her as a husband. I have had and always will have a caveman like mentality, and I'm always putting things away. I'm always looking for the next meal or the next dollar to put in a bank account. So if something ever happened, we're good to go. And I was focused so much on that, as she was as well, with her schooling and her career. We were both really, professionally focused, career orientated people. And in the Army, you've been around it enough to know how fast paced an Army career could be. There was a time one year in 1998 that I slept 5 months at my house, and the other 7 months out of the year, I was going through a course that I required me to live on Fort Leonard Wood, 5 minutes away. And I always thought that providing and as long as you wasn't cheating and you weren't a drunkard and you wasn't all this, that everything else would be all right. And if you neglect your relationship with your spouse, or you take it remotely for granted, which I didn't know I was doing, and taking for granted that they'll always be there and they'll understand that you're just out there working hard so that you can have nice things and go places. Well, really all she wanted was my time, and I didn't give enough of that to her. So there's my failure.
And it sounds like you learned from that. But in hindsight, would you say that lesson learned, has that made you more intentional about your current relationships or how you proceed? I'm not saying that you're going to remarry or any of that, but would you say that in any way you can walk away from that and look back and say, well, I learned a lesson and I'm better for it?
Yeah. I thought I learned my lesson, and I wanted to have my lesson learned, taught, and completely understood before August 19th of 2006. That was the date that we signed and were divorced, and I lost my mind there for a few years. Hell, I was even number one in the franchise in 2006 while I was going through all this. Closed another 175 or 109. I don't even remember. Very rarely was I ever sober, but I managed to, the market was so good and my momentum was so good. I just sold the crap out of houses, and, emotionally and stuff, when you lose somebody that you love and you go through something like that, I don't know if I'll ever be the same person again, or if this is the person I actually am now and was somebody different then. I don't know, Jeff.
I honestly, I think everybody changes. Different stages of life forms you into who you become. And I can say that myself, I've changed, and I had a failed marriage, and thank God I'm not the same person that I was when I was married to her. So, yeah, I mean, it's a process. It's a learning, growing, everything gets better, and it will. So, so let me ask you another one. Let me think of a time when you wanted to give up, you wanted to throw in the towel. What was your driving factor to persevere and keep going?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. I don't think I've been in the dumps. Don't get me wrong, but I felt I've always had this obligation to somebody else, whether it was my office, whether it was, my my people that I market with now in the fishing world, you gotta get up and keep going. You know, there I tell you what helped me persevere through that time more than anything, besides, my parents and my family, was Dave and Jen Holbrook. They come into my life. Dave and Jen were getting ready to retire out of the Army and head back to Kentucky. Um, I'd already sold a house for them before, and I was selling their house this time, and I don't remember what it was, but it again, the opportunity pops into your life, and you don't really know it's an opportunity. But I sat down with Dave and Jen. I was like, Dave, you want to? I said, you know how to talk to soldiers? You're a battalion commander, retired lieutenant colonel. You know the deal. I said, I'm going to tell you right now, you will absolutely tear it up in the real estate world. This was my recruitment tool. And I said, you'll make a shit ton of money. And if you want to live here, I said, I'll put you to work. I said, I got you a little bitty office back here. It's more of a closet shared with a furnace. I said, I'll school you. I spent a couple of days with him. I'm like, this is all there is to it. He said, okay, roger that. Got it. Moved out, drawing fire. Next thing you know, Dave Holbrook's a mini me. He's selling the hell out of things. He's, working contracts, shucking and jiving. His paperwork's wired tight. All the things you expect out of a lieutenant colonel, Dave Holbrook's doing it. Me, I'm a little more loosey-goosey. I'm a non-commissioned officer. My demo calculations are P for plenty. Dave was an engineer and a sapper as well. So we meshed. But Dave and Jen coming into my life at the right time after I'd just gotten divorced, let me deal with and act a fool like I was. Basically, they saved my life. They saved everything I had and kept things going. And a few short years later, I told Dave, it's like, I want to attack this fishing world full time. Will you be a partner? And he and Jen sit down and we talked about it. And we've been full-time 50-50 partners there at that office since February of 2013, 10 years.
Hey, that's right now. That's something to celebrate.
Yep.
That's exciting. I didn't know that.
Sure was.
That is awesome. What is a book that you've read or a course that you've taken that you would recommend to anybody who's trying to level up?
No such thing in my world.
No?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I'm sure there's lots of good things out there, but I'm not much of a reader. I learned how to count to 100 the other day. So, but there's a lot of good courses. If you're the type of person that, needs the Walmart chant every morning to get going, I'm probably not the guy for you. I usually just give you the tools that you need to succeed in a real estate business, for example. The real estate contracts are fill in the blank. So I feel like once you've been shown how to write somebody's name in line 22 and write the price in line 48 or whatever it is, that you probably are intellectually capable of doing it again in the near future. And that's my attitude towards it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it's good to go to, a motivational seminar every once in a while. I know some of our team went down to Florida. It's good to go to those things because you can learn some new trades or new secrets of the trade, or maybe a new technique, or a new pitch, or a new script, or some things that are working in different markets might be applied to your niche market. So I encourage people to invest in themselves. And that, just like your podcast, Jeff, when you told me you were doing a podcast, I was like, kudos to you. You're doing that on your own, on your dime, on your spare time to do what? Get in front of people,
Yeah.
educate people, learn something yourself while you're doing this.
Yeah.
And that's the Realty Executives franchise. And I know we're Jade Realty now, but that's what the franchise encouraged, was to recruit existing top producing agents. We wasn't into training new agents and stuff like that, because Realty Executives felt like that name executive meant you already knew what you were doing. And so we tried to provide as many of the tools and resources as you possibly can provide somebody. But when it comes to being successful in the real estate business, the it doesn't matter the franchise you're in. It's really all about will and determination and wanting to succeed and be successful. And some people are quite content making $40,000 or $50,000 a year. And I'm like, what are you going to do with the other 9 to 10 months out of the year? Go to Brazil or go on a African safari? What are you going to do with your time? Because I always felt like if you're an agent in my office, the sky's the limit, because people come in our door, people call our phone, people want to do one thing when they get to Fort Leonard Wood. And before they get to Fort Leonard Wood now, they want to find somewhere they can sleep. And they're going to rent, or they're going to buy, or they're going to go do the housing on post. I always felt like the basic tools are, how to talk to a service member. And you got to convince them. Here's what your rent costs. Here's what your house payment is. You want to own this house for $800 a month, or do you want to rent it for $1,100 a month? And once you got that figured out on how to pitch to a buyer the value of home ownership versus renting, and then have a rebuttal for, I'm not going to retire here. Oh, well, okay. I don't care if you sleep in this house for 32 minutes. The fact of the matter is, when you leave Fort Leonard Wood 33 minutes from now, or 5 years from now, or 36 months from now, I got 2 options for you. We're going to sell your house, hopefully for a profit, if the market's good. And if not, I'm encouraging you to keep this house as an investment property. Now, nobody taught this to me. I didn't go to a sales course. It's just common sense. Everybody's got to have shelter. And if you're a good salesperson and you can figure out the value to pitch to a person on why they need to own a house versus renting one, you got it made at Fort Leonard Wood. And that's the best training I could ever get or give to anybody.
Yeah. No, that we do have a unique market and very special opportunity where we're at, because we do always have people coming and going. And, I don't see that changing. As long as we have a military base there, I don't see that changing.
In 10 years, I was really super active selling and doing business there. I sold one house 4 times. I mean, honestly, what's the duty station at Fort Leonard Wood time frame now? 36 months for most soldiers?
Yeah, 3 years, 3 to 5.
Okay. All right. A big thing about Fort Leonard Wood too, Jeff, is we're a TRADOC installation. I don't know if the terms are the same now as they were a few years ago. I know the Army's made some changes. But what that means is we don't have at Fort Leonard Wood a highly large number of deployable personnel. We're training installation. We train people, and then we send them to deployable units like Fort Campbell, 10th Mountain Division, Fort Drum. Those are FORCECOM. I don't know if they're called FORCECOM anymore, but those are deployable installations. So what happens a lot at deployable installations like Fort Drum at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, is when they get deployed to a major theater, all of a sudden the spouses start to drift away too. They might go back home. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So a TRADOC installation has a more stable home environment than a FORCECOM installation. So I always encourage soldiers to buy at TRADOC installations, strong TRADOC installations, and be a little more leery at FORCECOM installations, because a lot of the tenants, again, when the 101st deploys from Fort Campbell, that area really hurts because a lot of the spouses and family members tend to thin out a little bit more. So, that's a niche market for us at Fort Leonard Wood.
Yeah.
Another thing is we only got one really super strong gate to Fort Leonard Wood. We're not a big installation. We're not St. Robert and Waynesville and Fort Leonard Wood, all combined. I just call it Waynes Vegas. All combined is not a big giant sprawled out place like San Antonio or Fort Campbell. Most of our traffic has to come right by our office to get to and from work. So again, pretty unique for us.
For sure. I just have a few more minutes on this, so I'm just going to ask you one more question. So looking at your accomplishments and success, most people would say that you're living the dream. Do you feel like you have arrived, you've made it, or do you still have big goals ahead of you and you're still on your way up?
My life comes in phases, and I've been a full-time touring pro for the last 10 years. I did real estate for 10 years. I did the Army for almost 9 years. I really don't know what my next phase or stage in life is. It might be building a couple of spec homes a year. I'm really enjoying building my own house right now. For the first time, I'm building myself a house. I'm really enjoying that. I'm working with different vendors. I don't know if that really answers your question or not, Jeff.
Well, I mean, you still have things ahead. You may not know what your plan is exactly, but you're not done. That is very cool. Well,
I've got to do a lot of great things, and fishing. I've been to the Forest Wood Cup. I've qualified and fished the Bassmaster Classic. I've done a lot of things in my life that most people, especially bass fishermen, would really love to do. And I can tell you what's helped me to accomplish a lot of things, and it's a real no-brainer. And that is financial security. And I never took on hardly any debt in my life, Jeff. And I've never been Dave Ramsey. I know Dave Holbrook's a big Dave Ramsey guy, but my dad, my grandpas, they taught me, don't ever overspend.
I apologize. We got cut off in the end, but we were wrapping up anyways. Come back, join us for another episode of the Way Up Podcast with Geoff Knoll. Please like and subscribe to the video. I would love to have you come back over and over again and gain value and learn the way up with me.